Welcome into the Warchant.com report. First of the year, it's game week, everybody. Time to get excited. Of course, I'm Jeff Cameron alongside Ira Schoffel and Tom Lang. Aslan, everybody is producing the program, and we appreciate all of you joining us. We'll be doing this all year long, but none more exciting than that first one, guys. 7:30 ABC. Joe Tess on the call. Florida State gets prime time at Doe Campbell Stadium at Bobby Bowden Field. Can we imagine this atmosphere on Saturday night, guys? Obviously, a normal preseason under Mike Norvell, a normal spring on into an offseason on into a fall camp where they come into the season relatively healthy. I think there's a lot to be excited about in that regard. And I'll start with you, Tom. Your feeling going into the opener this year as opposed to last season, where we really didn't even know if there was going to be a college football season.
Yeah, it feels more normal. You know, everything about spring camp outside of the masks and some of the protocols for the media was relatively routine. Certainly they had the off-season program. Aslan's video was an excellent one, was a window into all the stuff that they were able to do with Coach Storms and the strength program in the summer, and then parlaying it into a fall camp that, again, felt rather normal, especially compared to 2020. So for me, this feels a lot more like the routine first 10 years that I covered the beat, and a lot less like 2020. So that's the part about it. It feels routine. Hopefully when the ball kicks off on 7:30 shortly after, there's no surprises. But I'm amped up in a way I would be for a normal football season. And I think that's a word we hope we hear a lot of between now and November. A lot of normalcy, maybe normalcy for the program as well, returning to a little bit more respectable ways.
Ira, full spring practice and preseason. Is what happens this season really how we judge Mike Norvell and his staff compared to last season's horrific showing?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, you know, the whole years, whether it was year 0 or year 1, I just think you have to take it into consideration. They did not have a spring practice. They had 3 days. Most of the team went home for the summer. They didn't have a normal installation for a brand new offense with a brand new coaching staff. And so now we'll see what it's really made of. I made the comment earlier on Seminole Headlines that, this is a show me time now for a lot of these coaches and these players, because the excuses are kind of gone now. Now we have to see what they can actually do. But I think everybody's excited to see what this coaching staff can really do when they have a normal offseason.
Everybody knows the story of Mackenzie Milton, horrific ball injury, one of the worst you'll ever see. It's been compared to Alex Smith's, obviously very similar in that both nearly lost their leg, and at one time it was questioned whether or not they could lose their life. It's not an overstatement. I mean, quite literally, that's how bad it was. So that story, well known by pretty much the college football loving world, and where he was going to go became kind of the offseason story. He ends up coming to Florida State, participates spring practice battle for the starting job with Jordan Travis all the way in through now. Where do we stand on this? Ira, I'll go back to you. As we tape this on a Tuesday, for those watching at home, what's your prediction for which quarterback will be under center on Sunday night?
I think it's going to be Jordan Travis for most of the game. But I do think Mackenzie Milton will be available to play, and Mike Norvell has made that point abundantly clear. Every chance he's gotten to talk about the quarterbacks, he's talked about how excited Mackenzie Milton is about this opportunity. He said he expects everybody on the roster to be available. So that's going to be a huge story for Mackenzie Milton nationally. You look back at where he was 3 years ago with that devastating injury, just to get back on the field would be a big moment. I think the crowd will go crazy. If he actually starts, the emotions will be incredibly high. But I think for a lot of reasons, I think it makes sense to give Jordan Travis a start and then give Mackenzie Milton, maybe give him a series or two each half to see how it goes. But I think just him getting out there would be a big deal. And it just speaks to how much work he's put in. Even now when he practices, you can see him. It's not like it limits him, but it's there. It's different than it was 3 years ago. And you got to give him a lot of credit for just putting himself in this position.
I think the fans will wonder too, no matter who starts the game, how much leeway does the starting quarterback have before fans begin to clamor for the other, no matter who it is? And also, are the quarterbacks going to be looking over their shoulder? And how does Mike Norvell handle it? Tom, your thoughts on what you think will happen for either Jordan Travis as the starting quarterback or Mackenzie Milton if they begin to struggle? How short of a leash do they have before a change is made?
Well, in the fans' eyes, I think the leash will be relatively short, no matter who the starter is on Sunday night. And if you have a couple of 3-and-outs in a row, I think the clamoring will begin in the stands for whoever the other quarterback is to take over and take some snaps. They're just in a really tough position. To Ira's point, I think it's fair to expect both quarterbacks to play. They sent both of them to Charlotte for the ACC kickoff, and so therefore they're signaling to you already. Jordan Travis said it in the media breakout that morning that it would be a blessing to be on the field at the same time as Mackenzie Milton. And Mackenzie Mackenzie later in the day said, both of us are good enough to play. Both of us are too good not to play. I would think that in terms of if Jordan Travis plays more, how long is the leash? It depends on a lot of things. Mackenzie Milton's relative health or freshness level that particular night, and then also the matchup. If the offensive line is getting dominated, I don't know that Mackenzie Milton is the name you want to call and bring off the sidelines. But if the offensive line is handling business and you're running the ball well and turnover issues arise or something along those lines, then sure, maybe the leash is a little bit shorter. But I think we have to assume the way this season begins will be matchup based, and it will be based upon who has maybe the hot hand in some circumstances as well. But if the offensive line can't block, and that's been a concern for eons here in Tallahassee, then I don't know that Mackenzie's the guy you want to pull off the sideline and put him into live action.
Hopefully both are more confident and consistent than what we've seen at Florida State under center for the last number of years for a variety of reasons, not all been the quarterback's fault, but you'd like to believe you got two competent quarterbacks capable at any given time of running the show, and if one struggles, you've got another guy behind him that you feel good about if he comes into the football game. When we come back on the Warchant.com report, it's time to talk about the opponent, Notre Dame, who had themselves a very good season. Unfortunately, they had to run into both Clemson and Alabama late. That'll hurt your feelings. It hurt theirs. But prior to that, they were undefeated. And they've got a good football team again coming back this year. Change at quarterback, change amongst that offensive line. We'll preview them next on the Warchant.com report.
Live and living color and totally free. Subscribe to Warchant TV on YouTube, the digital home of Warchant.com. From the practice field to pregame and the phone calls afterwards, Warchant's YouTube channel is home to live programming like Seminole Headlines, Wake Up Warchant, The Jeff Cameron Show, as well as Trench Talk, a live Q&A with Noles offensive lineman Devontae Love-Taylor. Just search Warchant on YouTube and click or tap the subscribe button. That's it. It's totally free. Warchant TV on YouTube. Just another reason we're the ultimate Seminole sports source.
Welcome back to the Warchant.com report. First of the year, Florida State, Notre Dame, 7:30 primetime game for the nation to watch. Hopefully Florida State fares well going against a very good team, as they will frequently with this schedule this year. It's not easy out the gates. This time it's Notre Dame. We all know what a good season they had a year ago, falling only to Clemson and Alabama. And while the rematch with Clemson wasn't that close, and certainly the game against Alabama wasn't, if you navigate your schedule undefeated other than that, I think most fans are excited. But they are curious what they have coming back this year. Again, you lose 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen. They recruited really well, so I would imagine that group would still be good. Ian Book at quarterback is a name that a lot of people know. They bring in Jack Cohn, Marcus Freeman now the defensive coordinator. We'll get to the defense in a moment. They finished 26th in total offense, did Notre Dame last year, averaging 448 yards and 33 points, just a shade over 33 points a game. And again, you may lose a lot on that side of the ball, a receiver, a quarterback, a lot of linemen, but I do think that's a group that has been consistently strong up front. They're going to want to run the ball. Jack Cohn comes in from Wisconsin. He's the transfer. Talk about him, Tom Lang.
Well, I'd say, number one, I might have a bit of a sick brain because I watched the entirety of Notre Dame's spring game to see everything I could about Jack Cohn throw for throw. And given that, I don't know, he's not your prototypical 5-star blue chipper who's going to light up all defenses across the country with wow ability and crazy throws. That might have been dumb on my part. But Jack Cohn is a game manager. Coach Norvell called Jack Cohn a game manager in his opening press conference for Notre Dame week. I don't know that he meant to, but it's an apt description. He needs to get the ball out on time. He does. And when Jack Cohn does, he's accurate. He's afraid to throw between the hash marks unless it's on schedule. Early in the play, designed advantages pre-snap that he can read. He does like to take shots outside the numbers fairly often. So if we want to see, what Florida State's defensive backs are going to look like in singles, those new corners, obviously FSU's depth chart for the secondary is all over the place now, very, very different. Jack Cohn will take shots in one-on-one outside the numbers. So if that's something that obviously Notre Dame completes a little bit early on, I think he'll go back to it. But if you're looking for, a fear factor, this quarterback is not the one to fear. It's about Notre Dame's running game. Jack Cohn is going to manage the game, and he's going to try to keep everything on schedule. Beyond that, if he makes more plays, that goes against the grain and against the trends. That's not the player that he is. That's not the player that they brought in.
So to that point, Ira, I'll shift gears to you. It doesn't even matter what Jack Cohn is because, Notre Dame just line up and attempt to do what they did a year ago, which is emasculate Florida State's defense by running the football.
Yeah, that's their bread and butter. And the thing is, you look at Notre Dame football, it's funny. Some of these schools, you change the names, change the years, change the coaches, it doesn't matter. Notre Dame's going to run the football. I think back to when we were in college and Jerome Bettis, and this is just, they get these big, huge Midwest offensive linemen. They get talented athletes at running back, and then they just run it down your throats. And Florida State fans certainly saw it last year. They're going to see Notre Dame attempt to do it again this year, especially because it's the first game of the season on the road, new starting quarterback. And, look, that's going to be what it comes down to, whether or not Florida State can slow down the running game. They're not going to stop it. But if they can slow it down, then they don't have to at least commit 8-9 guys into the box to make something happen. I really think it's going to be important for Florida State early in this game to show that they can, with probably 7 guys in the box, to give the defensive backfield just a chance of playing coverage.
I'll stay with you here real quick, Ira, while we're talking, and flip it to the other side of the football. Notre Dame was a top 25 defense a year ago. They held people to under 20 points a game, which in the modern parlance of football, with the offenses having the advantage, that's a really good day at the office if you can hold opposing offenses to under 20 points a game. They do make a change at defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman comes over from Cincinnati. What impact will he have? I know we heard Mike Norvell this week, in fact, earlier today at the time we're recording this, talk about what he expects with the defensive fronts.
Yeah, they could not speak more highly of Marcus Freeman. And, I think Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator, and Mike Norvell have both pointed out repeatedly that he's one of the most sought-after defensive coordinators in the country, highly respected. Notre Dame went out and got him. I think there's been talk that he may even be the heir apparent to Brian Kelly because they want to keep him so badly. So he's obviously a good coordinator. Tom Lang did a great piece at warchant.com that I'm sure we'll include in the show notes for this. But, he and Mike Norvell have gone head-to-head before. And so they played against each other twice in 2019 when Marcus Freeman was at Cincinnati. And Mike Norvell had some success. They didn't go up and down the field, but against the Cincinnati defense that was very stingy all season, they had 2 pretty good weeks. I think they scored 29, 32, or 34 points in those games and found ways to win some matchups. Now, as Mike Norvell pointed out, the personnel is different. There's some differences in this matchup. But I think that's going to be a great game within the game, the chess match between Marcus Freeman and Mike Norvell.
Speaking of personnel differences, they had an all-world linebacker, Tom Jeremiah Wosu-Karamoa. He's now in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness he's gone. And they have some other guys that will be missing. They do get back an all-world safety in Kyle Hamilton. But let's talk about that loss and some of the personnel losses on defense. What do you expect to see from Notre Dame?
So it's tough to figure out. I was looking at some of the coverage from Blue Gold Illustrated on our partners on the network here, and they don't really know what they're going to see with the fronts. They get access to certain parts of camp, not as much as we do here in Tallahassee, but they're also able to take B-rolls. And I'm studying it because Marcus Freeman is about multiple fronts, 3 down linemen, 4 down linemen. If his program is operating at peak, if his defense is operating at peak efficiency, he wants to confuse you with the front 7. He's a linebacker. He was a second-team All-Big Ten linebacker at Ohio State. He played, I think it was a year and a half in the NFL before a cardiac condition ruled him out of further participation on Sundays. But he coaches his defense through the linebackers, and he likes to flex his muscle and show the complexities at the second level. So sometimes that's with a 4 linebacker look. Sometimes they go 4-2-5. Sometimes they have 4 down linemen, like a very traditional 4-3. So the folks up there in South Bend are confused because they know one way and one way only. And if you've got a multiple defensive coordinator, plus you've lost 3 defensive ends, you've lost a corner, 1 linebacker who was a starter in camp, who was returning this season, another linebacker and a safety, you've already got overhaul at a lot of position groups. But the thing is, Notre Dame has recruited obviously quite well. So it's not like the cupboard is bare for Marcus Freeman. He's got a lot of toys to play with. We'll see what he chooses to do against the Noles.
And I think for Florida State, that gets us into the 3 keys here because we can stress that defense and not knowing what we're going to see from Marcus Freeman. But the bottom line is, will this offensive line be able to handle the multitude of looks that they're going to get? And so often, as we get into keys for the game, guys, we can all name one if we like. For Florida State, it's about whether this offensive line continues to progress because you can want to do a lot of things with either one of these quarterbacks or your skill position guys. But if you can't block it up, it really becomes a moot point. And that's the way it's been for Florida State for several years now. So I'll start right there. Does Florida State handle the various looks that Notre Dame, Coach Freeman's going to give them? Let's hope that's a win on Sunday night. I'll go over to you now. What's another key for you for Florida State to have success?
And really just following up on that, I think the fact that they've got some experienced offensive linemen in that lineup is Mike Norvell talked about earlier this week. Devontae Love-Taylor has played a ton of college football. Dylan Gibbons played at Notre Dame, has played a lot of college football, has been on a college football team for a long time anyway. So they've got some experience, which should help in that area. But I think Florida State's going to have to hit some big plays. To me, for them to have offensive success, to think that they're just going to go up and down the field, 12-play drives, 14 plays, you might hit one of those, like one scripted drive, maybe even 1.5, where they can really put together a long sustained drive, but they're going to have to hit some big plays, whether that's the transfer wide receiver, Andrew Parchment, hitting a big play, whether it's Ontario Wilson, or maybe even one of the running backs, Trayshawn Ward or Lawrence Toafili. Florida State's going to need to get a couple of 50, 60-yard plays in this game to get some cheapy scores to really have a chance to win, because I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain drives against that defense all night.
When we come back, we'll tell you if Florida State wins, who the MVP will be, and we'll give you our pick. It's all next on the Warchant.com report. Welcome back to the Warchant.com report. Make sure you subscribe, or you are subscribed to Warchant TV by clicking on the subscribe button on the bottom right of the video. Click on the bell, as they tell me to say, to be notified of when new videos and live shows are available. Content includes the Jeff Cameron Show. Hey, I'm on that one. Wake Up Warchant, Seminole Headlines on that one too. Trench Talk with the Devontae Love Taylor, Recruiting Chat, and the new Sunday Smash with Ira Schoffel and me. Boy, I'm everywhere, guys. Okay, here we go. After last year's devastating 3-win campaign, which included multiple humiliating losses, would a close, well-thought-out, I guess, loss satisfy the fan base? Moral victories, guys. Would it be enough to convince you that the program is headed in the right direction? Ira, I'll start with you.
I say so. I believe that's the case leading into the game. But as we all know, once it actually plays out in real time, that can change things. And so that at that point, people they hyper-focus on the things that didn't go well. Man, we should have won that game. If only this guy had done that. If only that guy had done that. And then start kind of, maybe hyper-focusing on some of the flaws of a team. So I think that's the case from a pragmatic standpoint. But when it actually plays out, I don't think people are going to walk out of the stadium feeling pretty good about a moral victory. They're going to focus on the fact that they lost the game. But I think they should, because from where they came from a year ago, I think it would show a lot of progress.
Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I think it's two different questions. Fan base, no, not in the moment. For me personally, yeah, I mean, if it plays out, remember last year's game up at South Bend, while the score was lopsided, there were actually plenty of moral victories to take away from it. One thing that's on this channel is the Warchant.com postgame show, and that's something I do with Gene Williams. And I remember doing the show that night. That's correct. I know that's that's one of the things I remember that night was, you know what? There was a lot of that. The point being, I don't know, the fan base will be prepared in the moments after the game's over, if Notre Dame were to win, to say, hey, things look way better. But I think the media might be, it looks like they've got the ship, really, it's on a little bit more of steady waters. The choppy waters are gone. And if you can get that kind of momentum, what does it do? It helps parlay into securing the signatures for the kids in the 2022 class. That's all I care about this season is get to 6 wins or more and make sure that this signing class, which could be really special, is coming to Tallahassee and doesn't flip late in the process.
Completely agree. I think Florida State can lose this game and still play well and show real signs of progress. I know most fans, diehard competitors, are not fond of moral victories, but the bottom line is this is a rebuild, guys. It's going to take some time. The team is not nearly as talented as they need to be consistently solid on the football field. They're going to have setbacks against teams that have a greater depth of talent, but can you still show progress? Can you be organized and know what you're doing? Can you get lined up? Is there a consistency of effort and focus and intensity? I think all those things could happen even in a loss, and that would be a big step forward for Florida State. They also could win the game, which would be very, very exciting. Now, if FSU is to pull off that upset, who would be your MVP? I'll start with this, the run defense as a whole. They got to find a way to stop the run. If they're able to do that, I'm going to shift my focus to the MVP being Jermaine Johnson on obvious passing downs, getting home, creating havoc, causing a turnover, a pick six of sorts. Imagine a quarterback actually having to throw off his spot or move from where he wants to be. If Florida State could somehow force this team to play even left-handed, do something in which they are able to kind of enforce their will as a defense, that would be the MVP. Ira?
I'll go with a little bit of a wild card, Jamie Robinson at nickelback, because obviously Notre Dame's got a great offensive backfield. They've got a great tight end. They're going to really try to dominate Florida State in the middle of the field between the hashes. And Jamie Robinson is a really nice player. He transferred in from South Carolina last year as a tackling machine, puts up big numbers, is physical for a defensive back. And I think he could be a big factor both in the passing game and in helping to stop the run.
Before we make our picks, Tom, quick, your guy.
Yeah, I'd say yak either way, yards after contact or yards after catch, because I think a lot of what we're going to see is around the line of scrimmage. That's what Mike Norvell ran last year. It's what he ran against Marcus Freeman when they played in 2019, the aforementioned article. I think it's going to be the running backs bouncing off of tacklers and getting an extra 3 or 4 yards at a time, and I think it would be the screen game, obviously making some big plays that look like short throws in the beginning, but next thing you know, they get down the field. So I think it would be those details.
Before we get into our quick picks before the season, and this is always a guessing game early on when we haven't had a chance to see a lot of people play yet, or very, very few teams play. In fact, should let you know about College Sportsbook. It's a show that I'm on. My good buddy Mick is on it as well, and it's just getting going. Chance to take a look at the games of the week as it pertains to the point spread. We'll give you some thoughts on who or why we're picking a certain way, but also experts from around the country will join us each week to help preview those games. That's called College Sportsbook. Make sure you go onto YouTube and like and subscribe. All right, first game, North Carolina -5.5 against Virginia Tech. North Carolina, kind of the odds-on favorite to win the Coastal if you're not picking Miami. I also think North Carolina is a very good football team. I think Virginia Tech's in a little bit of trouble. It's a weird way to look at that program, given what we thought they would be a few years back when the change happened. But Justin Fuente has not been able to get it going. Give me North Carolina laying the 5.5 even on the road.
Ira, do you want it or do you want me to take it?
I'm gonna go the other way. I'm fading North Carolina this year, and I just think they lost so much at the skill positions. I think it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a more challenging year for Sam Howell than people might expect. So I'm gonna take Virginia Tech in the points.
Okay, that's partially what I was going to say. I agree. I'm fading North Carolina a little bit. That ground game was exceptional last year, but I do think, to Jeff's point, Virginia Tech and dysfunction are walking hand in hand right now for years. So I don't trust Virginia Tech to be the one to let the world know that North Carolina is not as good this year. So North Carolina -5.5. Let's do it.
Penn State at Wisconsin. I've seen a lot of fans saying that Penn State will bounce back after a horrific beginning to last season when they began the year 0-5. They'll be more stable than they were a year ago. I don't see it. I'm going to take Wisconsin here and give the 5.5 points.
I'm with you. I think Penn State. I think what we saw last year is a troubling sign. James Franklin flirted with a million different jobs the last few years. I think he may regret not taking one of them.
I'll agree. Make it 3 for 3. Wisconsin -5.5.
I think if Miami were healthy going into this football game against Alabama, I might have them with the 19 or the 18.5, depending on where you look. But I keep getting troubling reports out of Miami's camp that they're all beat up, in particular on defense. That's no way to live against Alabama. So even though Bryce Young getting his first big start in a game like this, I'll still take Alabama's depth of talent to wear Miami down. And I guess I've kind of reversed course here. I'll take Alabama minus the 18.5.
I'm trying to think of how many points I wouldn't lay, but I'll definitely lay the 19 or whatever it's at right now. I think Alabama's going to roll.
A lot of members of the Crimson Tide with something to prove. That's never a good thing, especially when you're way more talented than your opponent. 3 for 3.
All right. I like Georgia to be a team to compete with Alabama to win the SEC and maybe even the national championship. They, too, have had some injury troubles coming into this stellar matchup to start the year against Clemson. But what they don't have a problem with typically is their offensive line. I think they'll be able to carry the day just enough in the run game with that staple of running backs, to be able to open flipping field position. And I like their defensive line against Clemson's offensive line. Give me Georgia getting points here in what is a nail-biter, a fun game for all of us to watch as college football fans. If I have to pick a side, give me Georgia plus 3.5 against the Clemson Tigers.
What a great game, man. I'm so excited
awesome
about this football game. I wish they would play it right now.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I'm going to take Georgia as well.
I went to school at the College Sportsbook, sir. And what I learned at the College Sportsbook, which you can subscribe to on YouTube because Jeff taught me, was that if you're looking at the 4 trenches, right? Clemson's offensive defensive line and Georgia's offensive and defensive line, the weakest group is Clemson's offensive line. Therefore, give me Georgia.
Yeah, and that said, listen, at the end of the day, Tony Elliott does such a good job at Clemson with their offense. They're going to roll DJ out. If they're not able to get a push in the middle to get to him, Clemson can still win this game. So that's why it's such a fun game. One last pick before I forget, Florida State, Notre Dame. Notre Dame favored by 7.5. Oh, I wrestle with this. God, would I love to see this be close. And I think it will be for a half, but I think Florida State just doesn't have the depth of talent necessary. They get worn down. I'm going to have them losing by 2 touchdowns. Ira?
I think the number's good. I think Florida State's actually going to cover, but not win. I think it's going to be about, I'm going to say something like 30-24.
Good game.
I feel like in the last couple of minutes, this is going to swing either way with the backdoor cover or not. So I think Notre Dame wins. I will take Florida State plus the 7.5. I like the hook.
All right, let's not forget, there's a post-game show right after Florida State Notre Dame. Tom Lang and Gene Williams will be hosting that. Make sure you watch that on Warchant TV. It's always stellar. You guys can call in and ask questions and all that good stuff. Also, we'll have a pregame show for you as well on 93.3 Real Talk Radio and on Warchant TV as well. Tom Lang and myself. What time do we do that, Tom?
It's going to be 9 to 11 in the morning when Saturdays are the thing, right? But for this first one, it'll be 4 to 6 p.m. 4 o'clock live, Warchant TV, and locally here, Real Talk 93.3.
Thanks for producing as always. Aslan, for Ira and Tom, I'm Jeff. Thanks to all of you. Go Noles. We'll talk to you next time.